Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there. This is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franze Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franze Show. A behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franze.
Well, hello, and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franze, and if you are new here, this is where we take a deep dive into the entertainment industry to provide you with valuable insights and entertaining stories. This week, we get to talk with a singer, a songwriter, and a recording artist. We get to talk with Drew Ryder Smith. We'll talk to him about his time working with John Snyder, what it was like opening for Merle Haggard, and we'll take a deep dive into his latest single, X's. Now, Drew is not only an award-winning singer-songwriter, but he's an amazing recording artist, and I can't wait to talk with him tonight. So if you would like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jayfranze.com. Now let's get started. Drew, sir, how are you?
I'm great, brother. How you doing?
I am fantastic, sir. I am very excited for tonight. I've been looking forward to this for a long time now.
Yeah, same here, man. Thank you for having me.
Well, it is my pleasure. And why don't we just go ahead and jump in? I have a whole ton of things I want to talk to you about tonight. Can you tell me how your early days, especially your early days on radio, have played into your career now?
Man, radio is great. I miss radio. If it paid the bills, I'd consider doing that when I retired. Seeing that side of it and how labels, send new artists, how they promote those new artists, even down to how they will pull a new track at the last minute, to go for another artist. It's a really crazy thing seeing it on that end of it. You don't necessarily hear a whole lot of that. Labels saying, "Well, here's a new Dirk Bentley song," and then right before it's supposed to go for ads at radio, they'll pull out and say, hang on, we've got this other artist here. We're gonna wait till next month on Dirk's. And that was something that I never knew happened. And they all have reasons for that. And it's all, there's several different reasons for why those things happen. But to see that side of it, man, was wild. And to have artists come in and do live performances and do their radio tours, and they'd hit 3 or 4 radio stations maybe in one day, and they'd fly in real quick and say, "Here's some donuts, thanks for having us," and they'd play a couple songs and they'd go, "All right, we gotta go," and they'd be, they'd drive an hour and a half to a radio station in a different market. And so it was it gave me a good idea of what that radio tour stuff is like as an artist, because it's tough, man. It's a grind. People have no idea. So, yeah, man. And I was surrounded by music all day, and I can't really think of a better job than that.
No. We had Billy Yates on a few weeks ago, and he complained about where he would go into a radio station for promotional purposes, and at the very last minute, he would be pulled. Yeah. So he said that was an ongoing battle that he had to go through. So it's kind of good to hear from the radio's point of view as well, and how often that does actually happen. Yeah. So what was your most memorable moment from the radio time?
Man, I worked for Sam Phillips of Sun Records. And when I started in radio, I was like 14 when I got a job in radio in my hometown.
Insane.
Yeah. But I pretty much talked like this back then. And so they started me off reading, the weather and then the local news. And then I eventually got a shift as a DJ. And then by the time I was 16, I started working in Muscle Shoals. And then within, I think, a year or maybe less, I started working at a radio station, or a cluster of stations that Sam Phillips owned. And that was such a wild experience for me, because he was the father of rock and roll, the godfather of rock and roll, really. And so to work for a guy like that when I was so heavily influenced by so many different types of music, and knowing that this guy, he had Elvis and Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee and so many of those dudes, and Sam was still alive at the time, and so getting to work for him, man, the whole thing was an experience. It was a memorable experience.
That's awesome.
It was crazy. Yeah, I was really blessed to be able to do that. There's not a lot of people that can say that they work for Sam Phillips. Man, he was still a wildcat too, all the way up to the end. And he was all about, long live rock and roll.
Elvis and them were obviously before my time, but I did have a chance to record the A-Team in RCA Studio B in Nashville.
Really?
Absolutely amazing time.
I had no idea that you did anything at RCA, though.
No, that was only that one time. It was for the Audio Engineering Society. We put on.
That's all you need, man.
Hey, one time is all it takes.
RCA
right?
with the A-Team, come on.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a absolute pleasure. We went in there to do a presentation, and it was just a showcase type thing. But it was great.
Yeah. Thank God that place is still there, man.
Oh, such history.
They've had to fight for it for years, but it's still standing, still going.
Yeah, I was in town a week or two ago, and I took my daughter to a concert in Nashville. We went to see the Arctic Monkeys, and we drove up and down Music Row, and man, how things have changed.
Isn't it crazy?
But I was able to point out RCA Studio B to her, so that was cool.
Yeah, that's about all that's left to point out.
Right.
Yeah, man.
Well, Music Row's made its way over to Berry Hill these days. I mean, we've got the new Music Row.
It has, yeah. Everybody's moved down there. They're hiding out down there, man.
Just trying to keep their feet in it.
Yeah, everybody's trying real hard, man. Rent's a little lower in Berry Hill.
Oh, yeah.
But I get it, man. I mean, the boom happened, and you got these guys that come in with a pocket full of money and, offer up all of it for a little publishing house. And, if you own that building, I mean, how can you say no? Because they're offering way more than what it's worth just to knock it down, put a big hole in the ground and build some condos.
Yeah. Well, that's what we were talking about with the tracking room. We were talking about that last week, how the tracking room, it was one of the biggest studios in the world and just an amazing place. And everybody and their mother had recorded there. And then we just tear it down because somebody wants to put up a high rise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Money talks.
Progress, I think, is what they call it, Jay. I'm not sure.
Is that what that is?
But I understand that's what they say. I understood the definition to be a little different than that, but
it's all right.
Maybe that's what it is.
So how'd you make that transition from there to Nashville?
Well, I knew that radio was not something that I was going to do the rest of my life. I knew that I loved it, but that ultimately I wanted to write songs. I wanted to perform. So I left radio to get a job that I could get myself into a little bit of school and give me something to have a bit of a backup plan, because at that point I was a high school dropout, man. I had at that time I didn't even have my GED. And so I got my GED and took the ACTs, did all that stuff, and got into college, and just a community college. Became an EMT, did that for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
But, once I got my EMT license, I started working in Nashville, because I thought, well, man, that'd be the way to do it, get up there and be around it. And so I was driving back and forth from my hometown to Nashville, about an hour and a half drive, doing that. And sure enough, man, that led to all these contacts, even people that I worked with. And then I started playing downtown, and it just kind of slowly evolved. And I worked really hard on networking at the time.
What year was this?
Oh, God, 2008.
Okay.
Yeah, 2008. And picked up just a independent agent out of Texas. She didn't own a map. So we toured all over God's creation, and none of it made any sense, but it was It was a really good way to break me in and really show me how tough it was out there. That it's more than buses and hotel rooms and nice hotel rooms, things like that. You know, we'd go play 10,000 seater shows and stay in the worst motel in town. Barely make enough money to
make it to the
cover
next show.
expenses, much less get paid.
Yeah,
and I really, you know, I thought it was going to be much different than that.
Well, did you have fun during that time?
Yes and no. I starved to death, but I had a great time. So,
well, what did you learn from those times?
There was a week out there, Jay, where, honest to God, man, I lived on 1 pack of ramen a day, and that was it. And the rest, whatever we could drink at the bar for free that night.
Wow.
You know, wherever we were playing. It was wild. There were several weeks like that, but man, I learned that if you want to do it, you got to do it, and it's not always going to be fun and games, and there's times that it's going to suck. I mean, I ended up losing my house. I was young, man, and had owned a home for I guess 4 years, I think, something like that, and lost my house to foreclosure, and they repossessed my car, but I just kept trucking, man, and eventually came out the other side of that and ended up with a publishing deal, and you know, it kind of went from there. But yeah, my biggest takeaway was it's much easier to get out than it is in the music business.
Of course,
you really pay for it on the front end. But I wouldn't trade any of it, man. Those were good times, and those were good lessons to learn, and they made me tough.
Well, how do you keep the motivation to move forward during those times?
Man, I think it's the people, really, you know, because everything sucks for about, you know, 16 hours out of a day when you're running down the highway with, you know, 4 or 5 other guys, and staying in, you know, bad motels and things like that, sketchy parts of town, and barely making enough money to eat. And then you go play, and man, the people are there, and if you're doing your job, they're loving it. It's that, you know, 1, 2, 3 hours, however much time you get, whatever kind of circuit that you're touring on, it's that amount of time that makes it all worth it. Then that's what kept me motivated.
Yeah. Kind of gives you that fresh start every day to keep moving forward.
Yeah, for sure.
What venues were you playing?
So we'd get 10,000 seater, like festivals and things like that. But a lot of those places would be, you know, maybe 800 capacity. Some of them would be 300 capacity. Some of them would be, you know, casinos just to get us through to other gigs.
Sure.
There was a lot of that, you know, so we played everything, man. County fairs and
was any type that you like above another?
Well, you know, it's hard for me to say, man, because I came in to the casino deal when I haven't played a casino in years, but I played casinos 2008 and later. And from what I understand, those gigs were really great gigs to have prior to 2008.
Yep.
And after that big collapse, they stopped putting a ton of money into comps. You know, so it trickled all the way down to, you know,
right,
to people staying at the casinos. But they took the money out of that. They certainly cut the budget for entertainment. And so the budget went down, and what they would give you, you know, I've talked to guys that at that time I had talked to guys that had been on the casino runs, you know, even just a couple of years prior to that. And I said, man, they paid for every meal. You got the, like, these, you know, great suites to stay in, and you know, the works, they treat you like royalty, but all that kind of went away. I would have liked to have seen that. I think those would have probably been some of my favorite gigs, but really, I guess festivals, man. And it's because you have a bit of a built-in crowd because you're opening for bigger artists.
Yeah.
And so those people show up. And
it looks like you probably entered Nashville right as I was leaving. And, you know, I had done some of the casino gig stuff as well. And you get treated like a rock star back then. And I don't know what it's like now. It's been a long time, but we would get these suites that were, 3-bedroom suites that looked like they were bigger than my house. I mean, they were just amazing. And
Yeah.
it was a great time. All meals, everything, was comped.
That's what everybody says, man. I really hate that I missed that period.
Well,
I'm all about some casino food, man. I really am.
You know what? I just love the buffets. I absolutely loved going.
Yeah, same.
In Vegas, we went to all the buffets. We were up in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Yeah, we played there, and it was cool. It was a good time.
They still have some great shows there, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, they do. I mean, I was just at the casino here in town. We just went to see Steve Miller Band. Went to see Stained.
Yeah.
So, I mean, get to see a couple good shows here at the casino. I mean, good times. So, during all this, you're also writing songs. So, how do you balance writing songs versus performing?
Man, I've figured out that if I'm doing too much of one thing, I'm really, really missing the other. So if I'm traveling a lot and not getting to write, I notice that I really start. I want to get somewhere and be still and write, and vice versa. If I'm writing a lot and I haven't performed or traveled, I start itching for that.
Sure, that would make sense.
And it's hard. And you've been out there, man. You've done it. It's not. People say, "Oh, man, don't you ride on the road?" And it's like, well, when?
In between meet and greet and radio tour, or sleeping
like in
on the
bathroom,
bus.
or what?
That's too funny. So, all the songs that you've written, I know you've had some great success, but do you have any favorite songs?
Yeah. I've even got some recent favorites. I just had an EP come out, earlier this summer. I'm really proud of. And there's some songs on there that are some favorites of mine. I love The Truth, and I love X's. Damn Babe is another one.
X's is taken off on Spotify for sure.
Yeah, man, it's done well.
Yeah.
It's done really well. I wrote that with my buddy Rob Snyder. He's such a great guy, but he's a great writer. He's had several Luke Combs hits, and then you would never know it by talking to him. But he and I were writing before any of that bigger stuff started happening to him, and man, he's hung with it, and he's doing great now. But a really, really great dude. So I loved writing that one with him.
And that's one I wanted to take a deeper dive into, because just listening to it, I feel like I can recognize pieces of it, and anything from like the style of the background vocal to the background vocalist. So can you tell me a little bit about how it came about from, let's start with the writing process. How do you even come up with the idea?
Man, my partner jokingly threatened to break up with me. And I said, well, you don't want to do that, because if you do that, then we're going to spend like the next 3 months with you calling me every few days in the middle of the night. And I'm a sucker, so I'm going to pick up the phone, and then we'll talk about it. And then we're both going to be upset, and, we'll repeat the process a few days later, and it's going to be a whole thing. And so from that, I came up with, you only call me when you've been drinking in the middle of the night. I'm going to pick up, and, all that. So I kind of fleshed out the first verse and chorus. And Rob and I had a date on the books to write. And I guess it was a few days prior, I sent it to him and sent him the bones of the first verse and chorus that I had. And I said, hey man, you want to write this? And he texted me back and said, yeah, dude, I'd love to finish that with you. So we got together a few days later and finished it up. And when we did the work tape, we wrote over at Rob's office, and we did the work tape, and I sang the lead vocal, and Rob was singing the harmony. And it was just a little scratch recording on my phone. And so I was getting ready to record it, and I'd played it for a few people, one of which was my partner, and I went to do backgrounds on it, and she said, you got to call Rob for the backgrounds. He just sounded so great, just on the little scratch tape you did. And you guys blend really well together. So I called him and said, hey man, you want to sing backups on this thing? And he was gracious enough to agree, and he came and knocked out backgrounds.
So that's the backgrounds that's on that final recording then.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool, because it does have
Rob Snyder.
a special piece to it. I mean, it really does add a lot. And it's hard to put your finger on it. You don't know exactly what it is, but it does work. So,
well, it's funny, man, because I had originally sang backgrounds on my recording of it, and I made it a point to copy, I mean, exactly the way he had done it in the room the day that we wrote it. And I did that. I felt like I'd done a pretty good job of it. I mean, I had it tied up note for note, exactly what Rob did. But, you know, she noticed that difference and said, no, you got to get Rob to do it. And you're right, man. I mean, it's the exact same notes, but there's something about when he sings it that makes it special. That's one thing I love about music.
it's the chemistry between the two. Yeah. It's just got a different rub to it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times where the same vocal blending like that works out really well, and then there's times where adding a second person just really makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
So you guys went through that writing process, and you wrote it on your own, finished it in his office. Then it comes time to record it. Did you, other than the work tape, guitar, vocal, did you guys do any sort of demo, or did you just go in and record it?
No, just went in and recorded. I sent it to this buddy of mine, Russell Jackson, who's he's been co-producing everything with me. And Russell's a really, really talented guy, great guitar player, and his production skills are really getting really incredible. And I sent it to him, and I said, "Man, I think this needs keys and slide guitar." And I could be completely wrong, because I always feel, Jay, that like slide guitar kind of has a time and a place, but it's not everywhere.
You got to be
careful. As much as I love slide guitar, right. Yeah, you start caking it on everything, man, and it just it loses that special thing that it has. And I said, I could be wrong, man, but I think this needs slide guitar. And what I really was going for was the outro of Layla.
Oh yeah.
By Derek and the Dominoes. That outro part. And that was Clapton and Duane Allman. And they were going back and forth on guitar. Duane was playing slide. And then Bobby Whitlock did all the keys on that song. And Bobby's a phenomenal player himself. But he was with Dominoes for, I guess the entirety of their existence. But there was something about the way that he played, and then the way that Duane, played on top of that, on top of the piano. And I just thought that there was something really special about that. So that was what we went for, and that was what we aimed for. And I think Russell absolutely nailed it. He's a great guitar player, and I think he absolutely nailed the essence of what he and I were both hearing.
No, I mean, it was great. It was fantastic. And I don't know if you've had the chance to see the documentary about Tom Dowd. Tom Dowd was the engineer who recorded Layla.
Yeah, that's right.
He breaks that down, and he actually isolates those guitar tracks and how they build up, and they match it with Duane Allman. But either way, it was pretty cool. It was a cool documentary, and to hear those isolated tracks was really cool.
One thing I love about when Tom isolates those tracks, when he's got Eric's guitar soloed and he's got Duane's guitar soloed, and you hear them together, just the two guitars, it makes zero sense. And you just go, this is chaos, man. And not only that, but it's bad chaos. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And as soon as he puts them back in the track, everything is just, you when you hear it in context, you go, oh my God. It's incredible, man.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, that happens with mixing all around. I know you're a mix engineer as well.
Yeah.
When people get so focused on isolating each instrument to work on each instrument one at a time, yes, there's a time and place for that when you need to correct something.
Sure.
But when you do that, you're ruining that blend,
yeah.
And you don't realize you're doing it. But then, I used to teach at the local engineering school, and when students would say, I got this guitar sounding just right and this kick drum's just right, I'm like, great, now put them all together. It doesn't blend anymore. You took out the magic of it all.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I worked for a producer in town named Bob Bullock, one of the best.
Yep.
And he used to always say that, everything, he just joins the party. This other instrument just joins the party and everything. You don't isolate it. You don't take it out. You don't gate it. You just let it be there because it adds to the party.
Man, I love that. I love it adds to the party. That's a great way to look at it. Man, I have to see things that way when it comes to mixing. I had a friend of mine that told me once we were talking about this hi-hat, and there was just hi-hat all over these drum tracks, man. The bleed was insane. And I said, man, my God, and it was one of those things too, Jay, when you pull the when you pulled the hi-hat, the direct mic of the hi-hat out, that didn't feel right. When you put it back in, that didn't feel right either. And I couldn't figure it out. And I said, man, what are we going to do with this hi-hat? It's everywhere and it's driving me crazy. He said, you just make it a grizzly bear. Make it a thing, man. Make it a grizzly bear. And that really changed things for me.
Yeah.
I got to meet Bob a few years ago, and I was mixing a live show. And I'll say a few years ago, it's been more than that now, but I was mixing a live show that I had no business mixing. And I had a console go down. It was that, it was the X32. It should have been no surprise that it went down, but it went down, and I went and stole, I borrowed another console from another venue that they had in storage that they weren't using, and I knew that it worked, that it at least worked.
Right.
And I ran it back to this venue. Anyway, Bob was there. It was a cool thing.
Bob's one of the best. Absolutely one of the best. So what's going through your mind when a console goes down?
Oh, I absolutely panicked. I was mixing for John Schneider.
Oh, yeah. And that's why you met Bob.
Yeah. And so I was mixing him, and it was one of my very first gigs with him. And I'm not a live mixer at all. And I've never claimed to be, and I've never really wanted to be. But, one of my best friends from years ago was playing guitar for John. And ironically, John had recorded one of my songs. And anyway, I went to a John Schneider show just to see my buddy. And I hadn't seen him in a few years, I guess. And he said, man, you got to come out on the road. You need to come mix us. And said, we're really in dire need of a new live guy. You should come with us. And I said, okay. And I only said okay because it was him.
Right.
And so I went on the road with Schneider. It was one of my first shows with him. And we were doing a venue on Broadway. I don't remember which one it was, but he was doing a big showcase there for something. There were several bands there, but man, it was a nightmare. Yeah, I absolutely panicked. And the board it gave me a few clues prior to it happening, because I'd been there most of the day and I'd pushed the faders up and everything was good. And then a couple hours later, I had a fader that was doing a weird thing. And then, an hour after that, something else went weird. And 20 minutes after that, something else. And then by the time we were like 30 minutes from downbeat, and it just went kaput. No output
30
at all.
minutes to do that.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it was a wild deal. I ran down Broadway through the rain, and I went and stole. I knew where Irv Woolsey had an old console that he had recently replaced, and so I ran up there and I grabbed that. I didn't ask I didn't have time to ask anybody permission for anything,
Right.
man. I just grabbed it, ran it back through the rain, to the other venue and ran it upstairs, and we got it hooked up. It was a nightmare.
I mean, between the pressure and the panic going through your head, I mean, how do you get it hooked up so quick and get it ready within a half hour?
We got really lucky there. I mean, I already had all the lines ran, so the snake was going to the console. So I just I set it. I think I set it on top of the X32, and I pulled the lines
Just
from
start
there,
plugging and
popped it in, yeah, and then prayed
insane.
real hard.
Oh, that's crazy. John Snyder's awesome.
Yeah.
Bob was on here a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the thing that John Snyder did. I think it was last year or the year before, where he promised his fans a song a week to be released for a year. So Bob and John went in and recorded 52 singles, which is
Wow.
absolutely insane. So you are also an engineer. If we go back to X's, did you track your own session?
Yeah, Russell and I did all of that ourselves. We cut mostly everything at his place. And I think I did some overdubs, guitars, and vocals at my place. I had a place on Music Row until just a couple months ago, and they sold it, and so I had to move my studio out. But yeah, so we'd cut the majority of it at Russell's, and I did some overdubs at my place, and then we mixed it at my place. But yeah, we did everything ourselves.
So did you mix it, or did the two of you mix it?
Russell sat behind me and told me when I needed to take a break. So I consider that both of us.
Sure. No, I've worked with some producers where we sit right at the desk together, and even though I'm the one pushing the buttons, it's a lot of it is their ideas or things that they're coming up with.
Yeah.
So what kind of collaboration process did you have with him?
Man, just, he and I just trusting each other. One thing that I think we do well together is that when we first started recording songs for me, we both knew that we didn't want it to be slick. We didn't want anything to be super shiny. We wanted to run them through some tape emulations, and we weren't concerned about it sounding like what's on the radio. We weren't concerned about it sounding like a Jason Aldean record. Not that his records sound great. We just knew that that's not what we were going for. And so Russell and I had a tendency, we both have a tendency together to get a little weird. And I think that we're both pretty good at keeping each other out of trouble. I'd say, well, man, let's try this. Let's run this through whatever. And we'd try it, and he'd go, man, that's, I get what you're aiming for. That might be too weird. And vice versa. There's been times when I said, I don't know, Russ, that might be too far left of center. And so mainly I think the best way to sum up our collaborative efforts is that we keep each other out of trouble.
Can you give me an example of a time something went left?
It does it a lot with me saying, hey, Russell, let's run this acoustic guitar through an amp. I think we did that once. And he was like, I don't know, man. And it was, because it was pretty out there, but then there's been other times when, we've thought that our vision was really far left, and then when we actually heard it, that's not that far left at all. And it sounded weirder in our heads, But we trust each other, and I know that when Russell says, "Hey, man, I don't think that's working," then it's not working, and I feel like he has that same usual respect and trust with me.
Well, that trust is necessary, especially from your point of view as the artist in this case. You need to have that trust because ultimately you're the one on stage performing this music, and it's your name that's going on everything. But as far as a production point of view, it's also good to have somebody that you can trust working like that because, again, that's a team. Yeah. You're in the production or in the producer's seat at this point, so who's hiring the musicians and who's selecting the musicians?
For my project, it's me and him doing everything.
Really?
I mean, everything. Yeah,
that includes drums and stuff.
Drums and everything. Yeah. You know, that's been a blessing and a curse for us. But I'm real blessed that I get to work around a lot of A-list guys frequently. I mean, I just worked with David Johnson just a few days ago over in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Kevin Grant, everybody calls him Swine, from Nashville, played on a ton of hits. Tony Kreisman, who's played drums on a ton of stuff. I just worked with these guys like on today's Monday, so Friday. Incredible players and A-list guys. And Russell and I wanted to do this on our own and see how far we got. And I think we got further than what we initially thought we would. And so we've just kept going. Cause for me, I think my backup plan was always, well, if we absolutely destroy these songs, then I'll just go into the studio with A-list guys. I'll bring Russell in and we'll still make this a collaboration. That was kind of the deal. And that was my backup plan, but it's worked out so far, I think. With he and I playing everything and arranging everything, we've done all right.
Oh, sounds great. Like I said, the blend of instrumentation and everything sounds really good. It has a unique feel to it. It doesn't sound like what's on the radio right now. And it actually has more of what I would say comes from your influences. Can you talk about your influences for a minute?
Yeah, man, for sure. I grew up on a little bit of everything. From John Prine to Nirvana, to Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Merle Haggard, Don Williams, Dolly Parton, back to, Soundgarden, and then the Eagles, and then, Joe Walsh solo stuff. And Steve Earle was a huge influence for me as well. So just a lot of different stuff, man. And I've always felt like those things, whether you like it or not, things that you grow up on, pieces of them, it gets in your bones, man, and it's there, and it's likely going to come out one way or another.
Well, I do. I think you absorb it, and it just comes into you.
Yeah.
I mean, you had an opportunity to work with Merle Haggard. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was a miserable experience. He was a wonderful man. It was terrifying. I will say that. It's to be in the same room with a guy like Merle that's such an incredible artist and such an incredible songwriter. The first thing I ever did with him was he let me open for him at the Ryman Auditorium. And that absolutely blew my mind.
Was that your first time playing there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So your first time at the Ryman and playing with Merle. That's awesome.
Yeah. Didn't get a sound check that night. I don't remember what happened. Yeah, it was crazy, man. I got 0 sound check. He had sound checked earlier in the day, so he was good. And then something was going on. There was a problem with something, and so I didn't get a sound check. And I thought, man, if I can just get myself on stage, I think everything else will be okay. If I can shake off the nerves well enough. Several years prior to that, when I was playing down on Broadway, I had this bass player that I'd called for a gig, and I said, "Hey, Cliff, can you play with me Friday night at whatever bar it was?" And he said, "Oh yeah, man, I'd love to." He said, "Hey, just to let you know," I said, "I'm doing the Opry right before that at the Ryman. So if I'm a few minutes late, I will be there. Don't panic. But I'm just gonna run all my stuff down to Broadway from the Ryman." And I said, "Okay." And sure enough, he showed up. But anyway, after the Broadway gig, I said, "Man," and I had not been playing Broadway long at all, but I said, "Man, what is it like? And of course, for me too, at the time, I was like, why would this guy leave the Opry and come play on Broadway for me? Like, what's wrong with this dude? What's going on with him? Does he need drug money? Like, is he in legal trouble? What's happening?
Well, that's what Nashville's all about.
That's right, man. But after the gig, I said, Cliff, man, what's it like? What's it like to play on that stage? And he said, Drew, he said, to be honest with you, man, the first few times that I played there, I didn't even enjoy it. And he said, what happened was, the first few times that I went on, I was just so in shock by being there and the weight of that, and how I'd always dreamed of playing at the Ryman and the Opry. And he said, so after about the third time playing, I finally started to settle down a bit, and now I really love it, and it's a really great experience. And for whatever reason, man, that conversation stuck with me. And luckily, I remembered that conversation that night at the Ryman, and I went, okay, dude, if you get too worked up about this, you're not going to remember any of it. You're not going to enjoy it. So just, try to be cool. And this is any other gig. You're not going to be doing anything any differently than what you always do. So go do that, and everything will be fine. And so once I calmed myself down, it was really great, man. But I had to have a pretty serious conversation with myself. But Cliff saved me, man, because I think that's exactly what would have happened. I think I would have been so wrapped up in that moment that I would have went out there and I would have gotten through it, and I'm sure everything would have been great. But I wouldn't have gotten the enjoyment of it, and I wouldn't have really experienced it the way that I should have experienced it. So I was very, very blessed to have had that conversation with a guy that had done it many, many times.
Now, I've heard so many musicians describe their first time playing there, and it's the same thing. Everybody gets worked up. Did you actually happen to record that night at all?
No, I didn't. There's some videos floating around on YouTube of it. So, a guy told me the other day that he had run across it.
So at least you're able to go back and kind of visualize the parts you can't quite remember.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So when it was all over and things, settled down, what goes through your mind at that point?
So Haggard started doing 2 shows. Every time that he played the Ryman, he would do 2 shows in a row. So he'd do a Friday night and a Saturday night, or whatever nights it was. But he would do 2 consecutive nights. And he did that because the first night, all the tickets were taken by industry people. And so he added a second night to his Ryman stops so that fans could get tickets. And I was playing with him the first night. So it was all industry people. So when I finished, I got a standing ovation, which was incredible. But when I finished, I saw all the faces in the crowd. And it was, Tim and Faith and Keith and Nicole. And then, everybody from A&R guys to presidents of labels. And Charlie Daniels was there. And
that has to be some pressure on you.
It was pretty wild. I'm glad I didn't see him before I went on. And I looked up, and John Prine was standing up clapping. And I went, oh my God. I'm so happy. I had no idea he was here, because that would have really terrified me.
Being one of your major influences, that has to be a moment you hold on to forever from that point.
Yeah. The other thing that had happened on that show was maybe 3 to 5 minutes before the lights went down, somebody ran over to me and said, hey man, Haggard wants to know if you'll do, because I think my spot was maybe 25 minutes or something like that. So, hey, Haggard wants to know if you'll do 45. You want to do 45? And I said, yeah, man, if Haggard wants me to do it, I'm absolutely going to do it. And so there were a lot of things that happened. No sound check. Haggard's giving you another 20 minutes or whatever it was. And all these things. And I knew that it was industry night, but at that point, I hadn't seen who was there. But what I did know was that my mother was on one side of the wings and that Merle Haggard was on the other. And that was enough pressure for me.
That's all you needed.
That it didn't really matter who was in the crowd. But when I finished and the lights went up, and I saw everybody, and it was a great feeling. But I was happy that I couldn't tell who all was in the audience until after the fact.
Well, this is where Nashville and experience comes in, because we always talk about Nashville and what a music hub it is and how it's so unique. Like you mentioned, going from the Ryman to Broadway to play shows and why people do that. But when you're on Broadway, people don't always understand that those are like 4-hour sets.
Yeah.
So when you go to the Ryman and they ask you to play another 20 minutes, a lot of people would freak out over that and think to themselves, oh my God, what am I going to play? I only prepared for 20 minutes. I don't have another 20. But you playing on Broadway, I can only imagine you probably could have gone for about another 4 hours.
Yeah, I could have easily filled time with covers. And luckily I'd been writing full time for probably 3 years, I guess, at that time. And so I had plenty of original material to do. So that worked out. But, had I not, I had so much experience on Broadway, I could have gone all night, man, whatever they needed.
I know you've had experience traveling and even working outside of Nashville. What sets Nashville apart to you?
I think it's the same thing that sets LA and New York and now Atlanta apart, is that they all have, this thing, and they're all kind of doing that thing.
So it's a community.
It's definitely community. And while the styles of every genre are cyclical, I think the community remains. And it's the history, I think, as well, is a big part of Nashville. People have been recording in New York and LA for years now. So that's, it's not like those are the new guys. They've been around a long time, but Nashville just seems to have a much more rich history, I guess, than other cities. I feel like Nashville has always been more community based.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's part of the city. Well, not anymore, but at the time, it's a small city. So, I think everybody in that city knows everybody. So it's just like having a smaller community, and therefore people are there for each other. Like you said, somebody leaving the Ryman to go play on Broadway is not something you'd probably see happening in New York or in LA. Now, I've had the opportunity to work in both New York and LA. I don't think I've ever worked in Atlanta, but I know the communities and the people and things are just different. Not one better than the other, just different. And the way that people approach recording music is different in those cities. I spent the majority of my career in Nashville, but compared to New York, Nashville's just fast. Fast recording, in and out. You got unions to deal with. You got cartage companies. Everything is on a schedule, and the almighty dollar is flying everywhere because you got to pay for cartage. You got to pay for the musicians, the studio, the assistants, the engineers, the producers, and so on. There's just so many more things involved, so it has to be run more like a business. Where I think New York and LA, they have some of that pressure, but it's not quite the same. And there's more experimentation and more working with the actual musicians from the band than the actual studio players a lot. LA might have a few more studio musicians than New York, but I just think those are some of the slight differences.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Absolutely. I think also, they've always made rock and roll records in LA and in New York. They've always made pop records in LA and New York. Whereas Nashville is just kind of, if you want to cut a country record, you go to Nashville. If you want to cut a pop record, you can go to LA or you can go to New York.
Yeah, that's what I loved about it too. I recorded rock albums my time up in the Northeast between Boston and New York, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. Mm-hmm. And when I was in Nashville, I tried to add a little bit of that flavor to the productions that I got to do on my own.
Yeah.
But when I was working for others like Bob and so forth, then, obviously you just do whatever their needs are. And like John Snyder would be, in his case, not necessarily country all the time, but, the different records you blend to the styles that they're trying to put together.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So do you have any routines or rituals you do while you're on the road?
Before I perform, I like to have about 5 minutes alone before I do my walkout. If I'm playing a venue that has a green room and it has a downbeat time and all that, if I'm not playing a bar somewhere, I like to have that time alone, just 5 minutes. I just like to be quiet and just kind of collect myself.
Now, when you say that, are you 100% alone?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want anybody around. That's just my time to settle into what's about to happen. And then I also like quiet time after I perform, especially theaters and things like that. Some of the bigger shows, I like a little time just to unwind. But I don't have the alone requirement. I just don't. I want to just chill out for a second and really absorb what it is that has just happened, because I think that's so important. We don't get those shows back. And I think that's also part of why I like having the time, prior to playing, prior to doing the walk up, is to prepare myself. I want to get in a headspace where I can absorb the experience.
Sure. Yeah, I like to walk the venue, get a feel for what the audience is going to be seeing and hearing, and just to get a chance to walk out and get a feel for what the energy's like and just what the room is like, how the room is sounding, because each room acoustically sounds different, and from an engineering point of view, that's something that I have to get used to.
Yeah. But like you said, the energy as well. Like every room has a different energy. I love playing old theaters, man. I got to do so much of that when I was touring with Don Williams. We got to do so many great old theaters. And every one of those, as you said, they all sound different, but they also, the other thing you said was that the energy is different in every one of them. And they're all special and unique.
And do you know who Scotty Simpson is?
Yeah.
He's on the road with the Oak Ridge Boys, and they were just in town, and my wife and I went up to see him play, and we got a tour of the venue, and it's an old opera house. It was very similar to like the setup of the Ryman, and it had been closed for 30 years, and they had just recently reopened it and started bookings again.
Wow.
And I kid you not, It's like nothing was touched in those 30 years. I mean, the walls, the paint chipping from the ceiling, everything was exactly the same.
Oh, I love it.
And it was just amazing. And the Oak Ridge Boys, I mean, I know this is probably going to be their last tour, but they were just awesome. It was just a good night. I mean, I had a blast. It was just fun seeing them and listening to their music and getting to see Scotty play up there with them. It was just fun.
That's really cool, and I'm so glad you got to do that. Yeah, I saw the other day. I guess this is going to be their last run.
Yeah, I saw a post today that they were talking about they might play shows here or there, but they're done touring.
I think they always do, man. I mean, you look at everybody else is sort of, well, we're retiring.
We'll play here or there. We'll play in Vegas.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I have a 13-year-old daughter, and get this, dude. She is flying to Vegas on Thursday. Her and her friend. They're going to Vegas to see Carrie Underwood perform.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
That's awesome, man.
My wife's like, should we let her go? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's let her go. So
that's great, man.
Call me parent of the year or what?
She's I guess, is she getting close to the end of her residency there?
I'm not sure. I know she's only been playing there for like 2 weeks at a time or something like that. It hasn't been as often as it has in the past. But I'm excited for my daughter. I mean, I've met Carrie a couple times. She's very, very nice. So, I met her at some of the award shows. I've never actually had a chance to work with her, which is too bad, but she's definitely very, very nice.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited for her.
Yeah, no, I can't wait. I really can't wait for her. She's been listening to the music and trying to, just like she did with the Arctic Monkeys, she just repeatedly listens to it. She goes, I need to know every song. And she's looking up the set lists and stuff. So she's making playlists in the order of the way the night's going to go. I'm like, you do know it might change, right? Man. She's like, I know, but still. So I'm like, all right, cool. And I told this story a couple weeks ago. I bought her a guitar, a Stratocaster, and she wanted to take lessons. So we went out, we bought her a Stratocaster. And I kid you not, the very next weekend, we go out of town and went to a convention, and they had a raffle for a Stratocaster. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of people, and she entered and won.
Wow.
So now she has 2 Stratocasters at the house.
Man,
so
she's ready.
Yeah, I'm telling you, she can't play a note, but man, she's got 2. We're trying to figure out what to do for her lessons. They have one of those School of Rocks here. We might put her into that and see how it works out. Anyways.
Yeah, man. My partner's daughter is doing that with drums.
Yeah. She's
only done 1 lesson. I think she goes back this week. So it seems like a really cool program, though.
It's fun. I went there. We took a tour of the school, and it was really cool. And she went in for her complimentary lesson, and she loved it. They taught her an Arctic Monkeys song, so she came home, playing the intro to Arctic Monkeys. I'm like, okay, there you go.
Yeah, so she was instantly in love, man. Yeah,
so now
that's awesome,
I'm going to be stuck paying for that for the rest of my life. That's all right. All right, sir. Well, we do this thing here we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody who might not typically get some credit. Do you have anybody who works with you or for you that works behind the scenes that might not get any credit you'd like to shine a little light on?
Yeah, man. Russell Jackson is great, and you can find him on my Instagram pages. He's tagged on there, and I've got a great PR team, Core PR. They're excellent. My best friend, Jason Jones, is a great entertainer, incredible songwriter. I've been doing a lot of work recently in Charlotte. I've been going over there for years working. It's a studio called GAT3, the letters GAT and the number 3, Grammy Award winning studio. It sits right in the middle of Charlotte, and it's one of the most incredible facilities that I've ever seen. And you and I both have been, in the best studios in Nashville, which are world-class studios. And this place, is as good, if not better, than anything I've been in Nashville.
Very cool.
Great people. Yeah. So there's a few special folks.
Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Drew is an incredible talent, and he's just an all-around great guy. So please join me in giving him a big thanks for taking the time to share his stories with us. And thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. You can do that and find the links to everything mentioned over at jayfranze.com/episode 32. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franze Show. Make sure you visit us at jayfranze.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.